Hey guys, what up? It's the Tominator back again. Today I wanted to go over the Mr. Olympia finals. This confirmation call-out, this is the very last comparison round they did before announcing all the placings and doling out the awards. So I'm sure by now pretty much everybody knows how it went down. Phil Heath ended up retaining the title, clinching his 7th Mr. Olympia victory, tying the great Arnold Schwarzenegger. So many people are upset with that, no doubt. People are saying this was a robbery. It wasn't a robbery, guys. Even if you think Big Ramy deserved to win, or even William Bonac, you can't say this was a robbery. It was a very close-fought contest, no matter how you look at it. Robbery is what happened in 2007, 10 years ago, to Victor Martinez. Robbery is what happened to Nasser El-Somebody, and even perhaps you could say Kevin Levrone, Sean Ray, and a handful of people in 1997. This was not robbery. Even in 2014, that was more of a potential robbery than this contest right here. So, yeah. Anyways, I just wanted to break this down for you, give my analysis as we go through these poses. So, first off, man, I have to mention that Big Ramy didn't look quite as sharp as he did in the prejudging on the second night here. So, he did fade a little bit. It's more evident from the back poses. And, yeah, I think that kind of definitely sealed his fate for him. If he had come on even stronger, then, you know, we would be talking about something else. Probably not, because I think politics still would have impeded him from winning. But anyway, in the front double bicep here, man, I like Phil more in this pose right now. As long as he keeps the midsection tight. That's kind of what Sean Ray was pointing out as well. As long as he keeps his abs tight in this pose and it kind of reins in the bubble gut, you know, he looks pretty good in it. Still, I hate that belly button, man. He's got to do something about it. But in this picture right here, not too bad. I think he looks pretty sharp. I actually think that Dexter is his biggest competition, if we're talking about conditioning for sure, and just the lines and stuff. I think Big Ramy just looks too soft and smooth, especially tonight. Bonac is just a little bit too undersized to hang with the rest of them. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sticking to my guns here. I think that even though Phil doesn't look that great in this pose, I think he definitely kind of edged them out a little bit. But you can make a case for Dexter. You can even make a case for Ramy. I mean, this one's close. No one's running away with it. And Phil definitely doesn't look as good as he used to in this pose. In the front lat spread, again, a very weak pose for Phil, and his face looks so stupid. It's like he's some sort of maniacal, like, is he trying to imitate the Joker from Batman? Like, I don't know what's going on with that facial expression. He always does retarded expressions in this pose. That's something he really needs to be more conscious of and try and look more professional. Like, look at Dexter. He looks like a class act. You know, just looks so composed, just smiling like it's perfectly natural. And Phil, in comparison, looks like an idiot. That said, faces aside, when we're talking about the physiques, even though Ramy's the worst of the bunch here in terms of conditioning by far, you just can't deny that he's winning this pose still. Just structurally speaking, he's the most well-suited to it. He's definitely just destroying these guys with his overwhelming size and width through the shoulders and the lats. And that's what you need to fill out this pose properly. That's how Dorian Yates was able to dominate in this position all those years. That's how Ronnie Coleman also excelled in it, and Lee Haney before them. So that's what you need for this pose, and Big Ramy's the only guy who really kind of brings that element. All the other guys aren't really filling it out that much. You can see noticeable gaps between their forearms and their lats and stuff, and Ramy's, it's definitely you know, barely any gap visible. So for that reason, Big Ramy wins this pose easily, hands down. After that, you know, Phil looks better here, I think, in terms of the lats and stuff. I'm seeing less arm and shoulder and chest dominance, and I'm noticing the lats a little bit more here. It could just be lighting. It could just be the camera angle. But he looks slightly better in terms of the physique here than he did in the prejudging, I think. So for that reason, I would probably have him in second, despite him not looking very good still. This is still his worst pose, I think. And then maybe, you know, Dexter and then Bonac is just, I don't really like him in this pick anyway. So side chest now. So again, Big Ramy just, he looks great. Sean Ray was saying that he was winning this pose. I don't agree with him there. I gotta disagree. In terms of the chest, yes, he's winning this pose. Just in terms of the thickness and stuff, the beefiness of those slabs of meat, those pecs there, is undeniable that Ramy's beating all those guys in that aspect. But when it comes to the sharpness from head to toe, of all the separation of all the different body parts and muscle groups, Phil and Dexter are the leaders here in that department. You know, Dex has those deep cuts along his thighs. You know, the very nice separation between the delt and the arms, as does Phil Heath. They're the only ones showing any ab muscles, although, you know, Dexter looks like he's rocking a bit of a bubble gut here, worse than Phil even. And he's not really showing much striations through the chest, but other than that, I think he looks good. Bonac, I like the way he's hitting the pose the most of anybody, I think. I like how he's opening up, showcasing more width through the upper body. That's a nice touch, but I think that he does look a little bit soft and smooth, and I'm not seeing those deep cuts like what I'm seeing on Phil and Dexter over there. Big Ramy, I think that he's a little too closed off. I'm not really a huge fan of the way he hits the pose. I think he needs to open up just a tad to showcase a little bit more of that astronomical width factor that he's bringing. Because right now he looks a little bit small. You know what I'm saying? Other than the chest, he's not showcasing his width at all. He's not taking advantage of that. And these other guys are actually looking a little bit bigger than him. Like from shoulder to shoulder, Phil looks bigger just because he's opened up more. Even Bonac does. And yeah, I just think Ramy just needs to tilt his torso just a couple of degrees, you know what I mean? It's very fine-tuning, but I think he could hit the pose a little bit better. So, you know, maybe from a different angle, I would give him the win, but based on this picture, no, I wouldn't. I would say it's got to be between Phil and the other two guys. Oh, I don't know, man. It's close, but I'd still give Phil the win. In the back double bicep, again, so this is what I was saying with Big Ramy. I feel like he was stronger in the prejudging. I'm not seeing quite as much sharpness through the back, and especially through the hamstrings and glutes. So those are notorious problem areas for him. That's always kind of been his biggest weakness in terms of conditioning. And it seems like he kind of regressed here tonight a little bit. It could just be lighting, but I think that he genuinely kind of did maybe carb up too much or add too much water back to his frame or something. Like he just doesn't look quite as crisp as he did the night before. And even though he's dwarfing everybody on size here, I think that in terms of conditioning, he is probably the worst overall, especially when we're talking about the lower body. Phil here in the lower body, though, he's not flexing anything, so he actually looks, this is one of the worst pictures you can probably find of him. I didn't even notice that until I'm analyzing it right now. But you're not seeing anything in the glutes or not much in the hamstrings either, like what we usually see from Phil. So this isn't even a flattering pose for him, but I mean, he still is hanging there with Ramy, even though he's not flexing. So, and in the back, I think he's sharper. You know, I'm not hating on Ramy, so some people might think that I'm being biased here, but I'm just trying to call it like how it is. I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just saying that, you know, in terms of what the judges want to see, conditioning now is the primary thing that they seem to reward. So, you know, you can absolutely dwarf somebody. I mean, Rolly dwarfs Phil Heath, but you don't see him challenging because his condition's not there. So, you know, Ramy's, it's the same deal. You know, you got to be really, really razor sharp in the eyes of the judges in order to place well. So that's all I'm trying to say. You know, that's kind of where I'm coming from with all this criticism here of Ramy, is that he's just simply not as sharp as the others here. Look at Bonac for comparison as well. You know, noticeably more detail and definition through the back, more striated glutes there. Dexter as well. So this one's pretty close, though, overall, because Big Ramy does have the size advantage, but it's very, very close, man. They all look really good in it. Geez. Do I even have to make a call here? One thing I got to point out, though, is Dexter's kind of beating Phil at his own game here. He's kind of stepping way over the line, and you can tell that right away just by the fact that Dexter's about 3 inches shorter than Phil Heath, but he looks the exact same height in this photo. And that's because he's actually standing closer to the camera. If you look at their back feet there, you can tell that he's like half a foot or a foot in front of Phil. So he's kind of playing, he's out angling him, man. And, you know, smart little strategy. You know, Phil's been infamous for doing that in the past, so Dexter's kind of beating him at his own game here, you might say. In the rear lat spread, now Sean Ray kept saying that Big Ramy wins this pose based on the width factor, but I don't know, man. I don't know if the judges would agree with that. I don't agree with that. You know, someone made a comment on my other video talking about how back in the day, you know, even just maybe 10, 15 years ago, this pose was all about width. And ever since Phil kind of burst onto the scene and started winning, people have been paying more attention to the detail factor. And yeah, that's probably true, man. Like, it used to be more about the width. Now you got to have the detail to match. And Big Ramy's just too smooth once again. In the lower body especially, but even through the back, you're not seeing the definition like what Phil and Dexter are bringing. And once again, Dexter's kind of cheating a little bit on that line, making himself look a little bit bigger. And Sean Ray, though, to his credit, did point out something interesting that I hadn't really noticed before, and that's that Dexter is actually a little bit wider than Phil in this pose. So his V-taper is superior. So if you look at the top of their lats, it is slightly a little bit bigger than Phil's. So, man, hats off to Dex. He's still bringing it. So, yeah, I would say this is a head-to-head battle between him and Dex more than him and Ramy, just because of the conditioning and the detail factor. And Bonac, again, I think he's last, even though he outconditions Ramy. He's just so much smaller, and his V-taper's not as good. Even though his lats insert very, very low, and that's typically a desirable trait as a bodybuilder, I think in Bonac's case, it's almost like a little too low, and I mentioned that it kind of throws off his lines, and to me, it makes his V-taper not stand out quite as much. So, yeah, let's move on to the side tricep, though. So this is a pose that Big Ramy just doesn't hit well, straight up. The way he's tilted over like that looks very awkward. He doesn't look comfortable at all. Looks like this is a real epic struggle for him just to even grasp his fingertips back there because he's so huge, right? It probably is. Bonac, on the other hand, looks the image of perfection and just so composed, so aesthetic. I love the way he hits this pose. It's just money. So I would have him probably right after Phil in this pose. Just the only reason Phil beats him, I think, is because Phil does have better triceps. That's undeniable. They're just bigger, meatier. They have more striations going on. He's got the conditioning factor over Bonac here, and the size as well. So I got to go with Phil number 1, Bonac number 2. Just, he looks amazing in it still. I think Bonac's the most aesthetic in this pose. Big Ramy maybe next, even though he looks awkward as hell. But Dexter doesn't look so good in this variation either. He's not doing himself any favors by just extending his arm down like that. It's not maximizing the mass factor on his arm when you do that. You got to press it into the side of your lat for optimum visual impact, like what Phil's doing. In the ab and thigh, man, in this photo, I would actually say Phil looks better than Ramy, but overall, I don't think that's the case. I think Ramy beats him in this pose, and most people do beat Phil in this pose for that matter, because this is his second worst pose after the front lat spread, in my opinion. He's never been that strong in this one. He tends to his legs often overpower his upper body. I don't think it's as bad this year as it was last year, and that could just come down to the way that he's positioning his feet, the stance he's taking. Dexter looks great in this pose as usual. I'd like to see more separation in his quads. That's the only thing I can really kind of ding him for there. Well, as the calves as well, but that goes without saying. Big Ramy looks kind of chunky in this pose though, here in this photo, and it's not very, people say Phil isn't aesthetic in this pose, and that's true, but Big Ramy's not either. This is just, I don't really like it here. He looks very blocky. And he's got this kind of like anime demon expression with those squinty downturned eyes there. It looks a little bit strange. Bonac, man, I don't like Bonac in this pose either. They all kind of suck in this pose, aside from Dexter, I think. So Bonac's kind of doing the Kai Green variation, which is probably his best shot at this one, because he's kind of showcasing off those striations, the feathering in the quads there, which is a nice touch. But the midsection, again, just not good. So let's move on to the most muscular. So this is a pose that normally Phil Heath runs away with as well, but not so much this year. So I could not find one single photo where all of them were hitting it at the same time. So we're just going to have to go through a couple variations here. So this one's for Phil Heath and Big Ramy. Both of them look too smooth. I got to say, I don't think that either of them showing enough separation, striations, definition. Like, the quality is just not there. At least in this picture here. I'm just not seeing it. Structurally, Ramy kicks his ass, of course. The width factor, for that reason alone, I would be tempted, I would just say Ramy wins this comparison. Even though they're hitting slightly different poses, it's pretty comparable still, and Phil's just getting absolutely crushed in the width factor, so I'll give this one to Ramy, as well with, the thigh sweep, too. So here, this one's for Dexter, Phil, and Bonac, because Ramy was just taking a breather. And Phil's getting beat at his own game. He used to just crush people in this hams class variation, almost to the same extent that Levrone did back in the day. He owned this pose. But now, come on, man. Like, this looks weird, the way he's hitting it, kind of asymmetrically, one shoulder and arm a little bit higher than the other. Hands looks like they're a little bit too high. You know, you should be clasping them slightly lower. Like, look at Bonac, for example. That's how you got to hit this pose. Bonac's crushing this one. He's hitting it out of the park. Dexter's also doing better than Phil. So Phil's getting beat in his own game now. And even in the crab, too. Like, Bonac looks better than him this year. Even Dexter, you know, you're seeing a lot more detail. Or not a lot, but you're seeing more detail, especially through the shoulders and through the pecs, I'd say, than what Phil's showing. Dexter has that nice ability to pop his traps too, which makes them look enormous. So popping the traps is kind of like the way you can pop your pecs, man. So that's actually, his traps aren't that big. You know, you can see in other poses, he's actually consciously raising them there. So that's a nice ability, a nice little touch that he adds to this crab most muscular. And yeah, so overall, this is why I think Big Ramy didn't win, is he just wasn't conditioned enough compared to the rest of these guys, especially on Saturday in the finals. So I don't think you can really make a real solid case for him deserving to win even. So I don't think this was robbery by any means. I don't even think it was politics. You know, he flat out just didn't really deserve it. I'm not saying it wasn't close. It was hella close. He really gave Phil a run for his money, and this was much closer than the last couple of years. So this is actually good for bodybuilding, I think. You know, you might not like Phil Heath. You might not like the fact that he keeps winning, especially with his midsection being as bad as it was. It wasn't as bad tonight. I got to say, he reined it in a bit. It was pretty bad during the prejudging, though. But aside from that, man, he was well-conditioned, and, you know, he's very complete in terms of every muscle group, aside from the abs. So that's what it is, guys. Thanks for watching. I'm going to continue to make more videos covering the Olympia, so feel free to leave a like and subscribe for more. Until then, I'm the Tominator signing off, and I'll be back.